This is Daily Blast Live. We're talking about what you're talking about. Real, honest, entertaining, live. DBL starts right now.
Welcome to DBL. It is Tuesday, June 2nd. I'm Tori in the studio with Erica. How are you doing today?
I'm okay. I'm holding in there. How are you?
I'm exactly okay.
Yeah.
I think that's honest.
Yeah.
We also are joined by Lindsay, and she's joining us from home. Linz, how you doing, honestly?
I'm good. I see you guys finally, so I can see you got on pink and some black and white, so that's making me happy.
That's so hard to talk when you can't see the other person and you're guessing that they're laughing at your jokes. We're going to get straight into it because another night of chaos and unrest uprising across America continued last night. Peaceful demonstrations took place in much of the country for the 7th day after the death of George Floyd. This was the scene in Phoenix, where protesters kneeled together in solidarity. But yet again, in pockets around the country, looting continued, including in New York City, where hundreds stormed Macy's flagship store on Herald Square. I used to work at that Macy's. That's crazy. Police also became the target of violence last night. And a warning to our viewers, some of the video you're about to see is graphic. In the Bronx, a police officer was beaten on the street by protesters, which you can see in this video that went viral. Let's move on to Buffalo, New York. 2 law enforcement officers were hit by an SUV, and another was run over last night. Let's move to St. Louis. 4 police officers were shot in downtown St. Louis, where police and protesters clashed repeatedly throughout the night. And we head over to West in Las Vegas. 2 police officers were shot, 1 in the head. That police officer, we are hearing, is currently in critical condition and on life support. Now, in contrast, many cops joined together with the protesters, and our show is showing both sides, like in Fort Worth, Texas, where a tense standoff between the 2 groups ended peacefully. Police talked with protesters and took a knee in solidarity with them. Wow, that is so moving. It was a similar scene in LA when this LAPD officer took a knee and then stood together with the crowd of protesters. And in Denver, our hometown right here, demonstrations were peaceful yesterday, with the police chief actually joining protests and protesters arm in arm during their march. Meantime, many police officers are horrified by what happened to George Floyd and are speaking out against the use of force. So let's give them a listen. Take a look.
If I see wrong happening, wrong is not happening in my presence, right? I'm going to check it, and that's period.
If you, as a police officer, can watch that video and not think something's wrong, you are part of this problem.
Y'all could have told the man, get off him, he can't breathe. I mean, you're hearing him say it. It should have never gone that way. Rest in peace, George Floyd.
It's time that we take these bad officers and speak out against them and start holding them accountable and hold them to the same laws that we expect citizens to abide by.
Wow. So the question a lot of people are asking today is, all right, A, how do we stop police brutality, hold the police accountable when necessary, and do all of that without condemning all police? Erica, I saw someone put up a meme that said, if I were a teacher and another teacher of mine was found to be, let's say, a pedophile or someone who did something wrong, I don't stand in solidarity with that teacher. I go against that teacher. Why do the police always have backup from other police officers?
You know, I've said this a million times, but I really do believe that an indictment on one police officer almost automatically, there was a feeling like it indicted the entire precinct, all police officers. And I think that at this point, we're just seeing kind of like, I keep thinking of when I went to the oncologist with my mother when she was battling cancer. And the oncologist was talking about the importance of removing the tumor because the rest of the body didn't do anything wrong. And it's exactly what she said. The rest of the body didn't do anything wrong. And we don't want this cancer to infect the rest of the body. Now you have police officers who are cancers in their precincts, they're cancers in their community, and they have infected the rest of the police body. And now that police officers are stepping forward and saying what we've been waiting for them to say, and I understand there were safety issues, there were issues with a lot of things. I get some of the reasons why people may not have come forward before, but this is what has happened as a result.
Interesting. I think that's a great metaphor with the cancer, because that really plugs us into what it looks like. Lindsay, how do you feel about the situation of not wanting to call all cops bad, but also trying to realize this institutionalized police protection isn't getting us anywhere either?
Yeah, I think we have to understand that people who join the police force join into something that is similar to a brotherhood. And because I have uncles and friends in New York that are part of the NYPD, I can understand this from their perspectives. But I think it turns into more of a gang if you protect somebody who you know is bad. And Erica and I talked about this on our series, Who Cares What We Think? We talked about Chris Rock. He said that people like to say a bad police officer is a bad apple. But if a bad apple is also the name for a murderer, then that would make sense, because if a pilot drives their plane in the ground, then that would be killing somebody. I think all pilots would stand against that. So if a police officer murders somebody, in my opinion, then I think that that would be somebody who you would not want to stand behind. And if people don't get that message, then we're never going to be having unity with police. And I think that's something that we all would like, to be protected and served, which is the job of the police.
Well said. And again, I just want to remind everyone that it's been 7 days since George Floyd's death, and those 3 other officers on video in a kaleidoscopic camera angles have still yet to be arrested. Moving on, I do want to get your take. I'm sure a lot of you, please write me in on YouTube and Facebook. What you saw yesterday was the president. He held his first address to the nation in the midst of all of this unrest, touting himself as a law and order leader. He threatened to deploy the military if local leaders don't put an end to the looting and other violence. While he was talking about being an ally to the protesters, police used gas and flash grenades to clear away peaceful protesters that were a stone's throw away. All so the president could do this. He could walk over to St. John's Episcopal Church, okay, and hold a Bible in this weird way. That included at least one priest who had to actually run from the church's patio because no one was informed this was happening. The president then stood again, as I said, in front of St. John's Church, which has been there since 1815, and every president since Madison has worshiped there. It has been damaged the day before in a fire. As you see, he held up the Bible for the cameras, but the Episcopal bishop was not pleased with the president. Here's what she said about his photo op on the Today Show.
And it did not address the grievous wounds that we are dealing with, and the agony of our country. And so it was an abuse of the spiritual tools and symbols of our tradition and of our sacred space.
My favorite part was someone said, "Excuse me, is that your Bible, sir?" And he said, "It's a Bible." I think that says a lot. Lindsay, my question for you real quick is, how can you be a law and order president when we saw Law and Order, in my opinion, executing a man in broad daylight? How do those two go together?
I don't know. The only thing I would have liked President Trump to say is that Black Lives Matter. I think that's what we would need to hear from somebody leading our country.
Yeah, there's a thing to being in a consoler in chief. Erica, what do you wish Trump had said, or President Trump, excuse me? Yeah.
What is it?
I know. And you know what George Will, the conservative, said today in a column? Don't expect anything else, because it's just going to keep happening, and the worst is yet to come. And I mean this, and I'm not saying this as a Republican or a Democrat, but he is a chaos president, and he likes chaos. And what we saw with flashbangs echoing around him as he said he's going to be a law and order president as he dispersed unlawfully a peaceful protest was not a law and order president in my mind. There's the Black Hawk helicopter. It looks like we're in Kabul. This is, I believe, in Washington, D.C., my hometown. We also saw people, protesters and press being hit in the face with gas masks, and it looked a lot like a war zone. It was Seattle. This important conversation continues, and I want to just ask, Lindsay, Erica, is there anything that you feel we haven't brought up? Is there anything
I don't
that
have
you
anything
have?
else
I want to
really,
give. I just want to just give a space to listen. If there's anything we haven't brought up, to just have the platform to say.
I have to think about it. I think I have exhausted everything that I could possibly say regarding this topic, and I'll keep finding stuff to say and keep fighting.
I totally understand. I appreciate that. Well, coming up on DBL, our medical expert, Dr. Payal Kohli, will discuss the death of George Floyd in detail and offer her medical expertise. And as we go to break, we leave you with some really powerful images. We saw these on BuzzFeed. I think they give us all a reason to hope during these times, these really, really tough times. Take a look.
Time for new reading glasses? Go to
Welcome back to DBL. As part of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin's arrest and charges, the medical examiner released preliminary findings about Floyd's death to the public. Well, earlier, Sam and Al got to speak to Dr. Pyle Coley. She's, of course, been given her medical expertise here on DBL about this pandemic for months. But now she shares her interpretation, her medical interpretation of the report's findings. By the way, Dr. Coley is not only a cardiologist, but she's board certified in many areas, including vascular interpretation. Let's take a look.
Dr. Pyle Coley joins us live. Now, Dr. Coley, thank you for speaking on this today, because for months you've been giving us your expertise on the pandemic. But today we want your medical perspective on this report. So, doctor, walk us through the timeline of this incident according to the report.
So, Sam, based on the charging documents, we know that the police arrived at the scene at 8:08 p.m. At 8:19 p.m., Mr. Floyd was placed face down, handcuffed behind his back, and ex-officer Chauvin actually placed his knee on his neck at that point. It was also found in the charging documents that two other officers also held him down with weight on his back and his legs. And as you can imagine, from a medical standpoint, being face down with your hands cuffed behind your back makes it extremely difficult to breathe and extremely difficult to expand your chest if you've got extra weight on your back. In fact, he was repeatedly yelling out that he couldn't breathe. There was also a bystander that noticed he had blood coming out of his nose, and this could have been due to possible facial trauma. At 8:24 p.m., he went unresponsive, and at 8:25 p.m., Mr. Floyd was noted not to be breathing or speaking, and one of the officers commented that they could not find a pulse. Despite not finding a pulse, and despite being trained in CPR, none of the officers actually initiated CPR at that point. In fact, ex-officer Chauvin continued to have his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck for another 2 minutes and 53 seconds until the ambulance arrived at 8:27. Finally, he got off at 8:27. The ambulance arrived. They started CPR. They tried an IV. They tried medications. They tried to shock Mr. Floyd's heart, but none of those measures were reported to have worked. And at 9:25 p.m., he was pronounced dead at the medical center.
I'm
It's
sick to my
ridiculous.
stomach.
You should be, Sam. Are there any other big takeaways, Doc? I know they tried to say that he had a history of heart disease and alcohol in his system. Can you debunk those?
Yeah, so let's talk about this. This was a very preliminary report, but there were some curious findings that I was surprised to see in a medical examiner's report. So the first was this supposition that he had underlying hypertensive heart disease and coronary artery disease, which as a cardiologist, I see a lot, particularly in the young African-American community, but that doesn't necessarily lead to somebody's death. And the fact that Mr. Floyd, who was only 46 years old, ended up dying from these conditions, supposedly, just means that he may have been more sensitive to that lack of oxygen. And that's how I would interpret that.
Even if he
the
did,
second finding that
I'm sorry, I just have to intervene right now. Even if he did, and I know that it's brought up for nefarious purposes, but even if he did, he was screaming out, "I can't breathe." He was unresponsive. They checked his pulse, could have intervened, had an aha moment right there if they would have had some sort of conscience. And then Chauvin still kept his knee on his neck. So I don't care what they find in the report. It's blatant murder, in my opinion, just by watching the actions in that video.
You're absolutely right, Sam. And at any point, we know that the difference between life and death is starting CPR right away. In fact, a few seconds of CPR can make that difference, and he didn't get it for 3 minutes. The other thing that was curious in the report was this potential intoxicants. Do they have the toxicology report? Did he have intoxicants or didn't he? And then finally, this finding that he didn't have traumatic asphyxia does not, to your point, rule out asphyxia as a cause of death. So this just basically tells us that he didn't have trauma to the trachea, but he could very much have still died from lack of oxygen. And those were his last words: "I can't breathe. I'm going to die."
Right. Thank you, Dr. Kohler.
Thanks, Doc. We appreciate you.
We'll be right back.
The Sun used to make
Welcome back to DBL. Changing gears here. On November 5th, 1989, Betty Broderick shot and killed her ex-husband and his new wife while they lay in bed. Well, today, Amanda Peet is portraying her in the newest installment of the Dirty John series, The Betty Broderick Story. It premieres tonight on USA Network, and earlier, I spoke with Amanda in a very candid Today's Chatting with the Stars.
Betty Broderick is pretty. People like her. She's a good mother. What are you doing? Telling the kids that I'm crazy? She feels incompetent. Why are you doing this?
I have no idea how to fix this.
Amanda Peet, welcome to DBL. First off, we start every interview with, how are you handling the quarantine life?
A lot of wine.
Court order.
How am I supposed to see my kids?
Betty, stop!
Oprah Winfrey called the story of Betty Broderick one of the messiest divorces in history, and that was even before the murders. So tell me how you and Christian Slater built that tension.
We had great writing, and the way Alexandra showed the burgeoning tension and how it boiled over, it was excellent. So Christian and I were basically just strapped in.
Dan Broderick, not such a great guy, but Betty Broderick has her flaws too. And I wondered how you intellectually and sort of cerebrally, because I know that's how you work, find sympathy in that kind of a character when you're getting ready to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to talk about acting without sounding like such a schmuck, but I just tried to go scene by scene and not think too much about where the story ended. I tried to kind of stay where we were in time and space.
I'm a woman being divorced in America. I have no rights.
You're famously best friends with Sarah Paulson of the American Horror Story, and this is one of the most famous American Horror Stories. Did you ever work with Sarah to tap into that dark place, or do you have a place you go to get into that rage?
I call her sometimes for acting help. Definitely. And there were some weekends where I would go rehearse Betty Broderick at her house with her and Holland Taylor. And they would give me, acting advice. We would play out the scene. So I rehearse with her, but and I call her for help when I'm freaking out. Yeah, that's a true fact.
Why are you doing this? Dirty John, the Betty Broderick story premieres June 2nd on USA. Amanda Peet.
Hold on. Hey, Frankie. The entire house is on Zoom. I'm doing an interview, babe.
Hi.
Sorry.
Amanda Peet, it has been a real pleasure. Thanks for coming to DBL. We'll be right back.
Promotional consideration is brought to you by...
Hello.
Welcome back to DBL. It's time for Security Alert, sponsored by LifeLock. Many freelancers who've been hit with unemployment are now tied up with a scam costing them thousands of dollars. So let's warn you all. During the coronavirus pandemic, people turned to a site called Upwork. It's a popular job service. It's used for professionals and freelancers to post and find gigs. But many are reporting being scammed, saying after they received a check via money transfer apps like Venmo, the scammers were then able to get access into their bank account. Minutes later, their accounts were overdrawn by thousands of dollars. Oh my gosh! Like, it can't get any worse. To protect yourself from fraud, call LifeLock at 1-800-495-8730. This is great to know because artists, we need you, and independent artists and freelancers are so vulnerable right now. Very, very vulnerable.
Well, it's like, if it sounds too good to be true, it generally is, but people are in desperate times.
Right.
So you want to believe that there's a way to help yourself.
Yeah, let's not do Upwork anymore. More celebrities are speaking out about racism and the need for change in the wake of George Floyd's death. In an essay published in the Daily Beast, George Clooney calls racism our pandemic, saying, quote, "It infects all of us, and in 400 years, we've yet to find a vaccine." The actor also called for systematic change in our law enforcement and criminal justice system. Adele posted a photo of George Floyd, writing that racism isn't only about America, and that racial inequality is alive and well everywhere. Lindsay, you said something yesterday that made me think when you said from 1619 to 1865 we were enslaved, and from then on to 1950s, 60s, we were in segregation. So it hasn't been that long until you all have really strived for having absolute freedom.
Right, and I just want to say, when these celebrities and companies post these things online, I really would like to see the plans behind it. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, have some action steps is what you're saying. I appreciate that. DBL, we are new every day. We will see you same time, same place tomorrow.